everything we've talked about today. But in a sense, it's sort of the confluence of art and commerce. Because with programming, which we're going to focus on, you have something that is always at the center of American culture. And of course, from a business standpoint, it provides the basis for however many billions of dollars are spent in TV every year. So that's kind of a neat thing. We're privileged to have a great panel. I'll introduce them quickly, although no introduction necessarily needed. Tim Brooks, who literally wrote the book on TV programming, the complete directory to primetime network and cable shows. You said you had it on your office shelf?
I do, it's on my shelf, Tim.
Okay.
And
All right.
I actually give it to every new employee.
Good for you.
Okay. So Amazon.com, we can go. Okay, all right. Former top industry research executive, Bill Carroll on his left, Vice President, Director of Programming at the Katz Television Group. He heads the department responsible for all kinds of programming research and I guess advise stations on programming trends, for sure, right? Chet Fenster, managing partner at MEC Entertainment. He oversees the branded entertainment arm affiliated with the MEC agency, what was it, formerly known as Media Edge CIA.
Yeah,
right?
part of Group M.
Part of Group M, for sure. Billy Gold, to his left, Vice President Programming Services at Kara USA, deeply involved as well in all sorts of programming research. And Don Seaman, Manager of Marketing Communications at the TVB, a trade group that represents stations and their advertising efforts, previously working at the agency MPG. So maybe to a degree, we'll ask him to put his MPG hat on so he doesn't overly tout broadcasting. The term is frequently thrown around that we are in a golden age of television. And I think there are some reasons to actually buy into that, perhaps more so than ever in drama. Tim, do you have a take on that? Because you've written about what was, I guess, the previous golden age.
Well, I've done a lot of research with consumers too, of course, and if there's anything I've learned is that the golden age is whenever you were between 15 and 25, when you were young, basically. Even if the shows were Gilligan's Island or something that today looks kind of less than Emmy award winning. So that's the golden age. In terms of programming and choice of programming that is arguably quality programming, whatever that term means. We think back of the 50s, the first age you were talking about, and Playhouse 90 and great shows. Nobody remembers the Gas Company Playhouse or Girl Alone or some of these obscure shows that filled the schedule back there that were not Playhouse 90, to put it mildly. Today, with so many voices out there, with so many cable networks, competing with each other, taking chances because that's how they get noticed, to take chances. There's arguably a lot more available, just in quantity, than there has ever been in TV history. The challenge is simply finding it.
You know what I think is interesting, and I'll go to Billy on this one, is when I think about it today is 20 years ago, I may have mentioned to someone, do you watch Walking Dead, or do you watch Burn Notice, or The Good Wife? And they may say, I don't, but they would have at least heard of the show. But there are so many really good dramas out there where you find 5 people of your friends who love them and 5 people never heard of it. And to me, that actually kind of is a reason to think we are in sort of that golden age.
Well, I think that there are just so many choices out there now. So I feel that when people take a show such as The Walking Dead or whatever, it might have started out as a smaller show, but because of social media and you hear people like the water cooler talking about it, you're saying, well, maybe I should check this show out, and it grows. And so the thing is that there's so many choices for people now that it's so hard to watch every show. So it's those few shows that seem to catch something in the public that seem to grow and have a life of their own and start rising up, to prominence. And even shows, I mean, it's very hard to promote shows. And if you take a show like Mad Men, it won, best drama for a number of years, and it was a critic darling, but the ratings were still relatively small.
Right.
But I think AMC with The Walking Dead had a platform to really promote the show, And a lot of people were tuning into The Walking Dead, and the ratings for the season opener for Mad Men were bigger than ever because they had a platform to promote it. So I think it's getting the word out about a show, or water cooler type shows that take on a life of its own, is the way shows really get out there now.
Bill, any thoughts on
The
where
only
we
thing
stand?
I would add to that is it is a golden age, not only in cable, but in broadcast. I think if you look at the consistency of the broadcast networks and what they're able to deliver, look at a show like The Good Wife, or look at Smash, or look at Modern Family, and the consistency of top-notch entertainment. It is a golden age. It's across the spectrum, but you can't deny that on a pretty consistent basis, the broadcast networks also deliver a pretty high quality of programming that exists on a 26-week or 22-week year basis. And I think that's sometimes lost in looking at some of the short-run cable programs. And I think there's the balance. I think the viewer is given a great variety, and I think they're given a pretty good quality.
Don, I have a feeling you may agree. Broadcast networks are doing great.
Absolutely. I do agree that broadcast is a great place for quality programming. But I want to go back to the idea of the golden age as kind of a concept, because I really think that we've always been in a golden age of TV for content, because there's always been great content on TV. Going back to the beginning of television, there's always been something great. But I think that we're in almost a second golden age of television, which is distribution. That we can get, and people expect to get, great programming on demand everywhere that they go. So I think that we're really in a second golden age, and then the third golden age that needs to really come about is going to be in measurement. And then we're going to be at three kind of tentpole golden age of our medium, that it's always, the content has always been strong, but now we have distribution that's catching up to the content, and then the measurement that needs to catch up to the distribution. And then we have a true golden age of television.
You know, Chet, I'll ask you to pick up on that in a sense, because you bring up a good point. If you want to say, besides programming, distribution also propels that golden age. This idea the consumer is in control clearly makes it, if not golden, a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, 100%, and that's what it is. It's the quantity and plus quality plus choice. So it's the quantity of good material out there. I think that's the golden age when everybody looks back to the 50s, where if you look at not only some of the actors, but the talent working in Paddy Chayefsky and some of the series that came out of that, and you look at that and you go, oh my God, that all happened at that time. And you say, wow, we haven't had television like that, even though we've had hits over the decades. You go, wow, you haven't had that concentration. And now you look at the same thing, wow, there hasn't been that many good shows on television in such a short period of time. So it's the quality plus the quantity, and now the choice, as you said. As a consumer, I can get it whenever, wherever I want, between Hulu, Netflix, broadcast, my DVR, my Slingbox, whatever it is. I can time shift, play shift, get it when I want it, and that's an amazing thing.
It is. It's amazing.
Can I just speak to that? I'm not sure that I agree that it's always been a golden age. The early 60s, the vast wasteland years, were pretty dry. The 70s and 80s, television became quite formal.
No, I'm saying that there were always pockets of hits, and I think what we consider a golden age is when there's a concentration of a lot of really good, or concentration of quality.
The point I was going to make is that there wasn't much competition for the three then, after a while, four broadcast networks in the 70s, when things were quite formulaic. Once competition reared its head, and once cable got into the mix and actually started doing stuff in the 90s, that propelled, competition is good, and that propelled a lot of creativity, even on the broadcast side. There's still this tension at the broadcast networks between large size audiences and quality. that makes it harder for them to be patient, makes it harder for them to develop programs. And they've all bought cable networks, and often that's where the real creative ideas come from. But I think if we're in a golden age, or if there's a lot of choice now, it's because we have this competition for eyeballs, ability to attract specific segments of the audience that we didn't have before.
Can I
Yeah,
just,
and-
sorry.
Continue,
I just want to say
please.
one thing. I mean, we say it's a golden age, and I do agree it's a golden age in terms of choice and there's tons
Yes.
of quality. But if you ask the average viewer if it's a golden age of television, most would say no, because there's so much reality television that's, on the landscape, in the TV landscape, and people go, what happened to those good scripted shows that I used to watch in the 60s and 70s? What happened to those? So while we as TV people see that there are definitely quality dramas on television, such as The Good Wife on network, and many on cable, and many on network, there's so many choices out there that there's a lot of reality shows and a lot of, I don't want to say garbage television, but a lot, because they have to fill the space. So there, in one way, it is a golden age because quality has risen, but I wouldn't say in general it's a golden age of television in terms as a whole. That's just my personal perspective.
Thank you for bringing that up to a degree. I'd like to follow up on that, and I think what you said, and Tim. So Smash, new show on NBC. I like it, and it's doing okay. For NBC, it's doing phenomenal. But and it's been renewed. But I think it leads to an interesting question, which is the fate of the serial drama. And that sort of goes into what you said, because if reality is a whole nother bucket, Grey's Anatomy still a top show. Once Upon a Time done well on ABC, but I think you could probably make a case that the serial drama is going to struggle going forward, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Bill, it's hard to syndicate, so the investment in starting it is going to be tough. To get a devoted audience to tune in week after week, even with the DVR and online opportunity, is going to be tougher and tougher. Bill Carroll, if you want to start, are serial dramas in for a tough time going forward?
Yeah, I think the point that you made, I would reiterate, which is if you look at the investment that's going to be made in dramatic programming, the payout or the payoff comes in the secondary market, whether it's in syndication to broadcast television stations or it's on cable. And those programs, for the most part, have had a difficult time in being successful in running on either of those areas. And the procedural, which is self-contained,
Right.
tends to have a greater shelf life and a longer run. It's unusual because the same is not true when you talk about sitcoms. When you talk about comedies that do have a continuing storyline and a progression of characters tend to play again and again and again, and everyone remembers their favorite episode of Seinfeld, or these days, 2.5 Men, or Big Bang Theory. That doesn't hold for some reason. Once you know the outcome in a serialized drama, they tend not to come back, and even in their reruns, or what the networks would like to call rebroadcasts, they don't hold up as well.
This is the conundrum, though, for networks versus the studios, especially in a vertically integrated company. So what you'll see on networks, especially the cable networks, they want these serialized dramas because that's what gets people to tune in. That's what creates this excitement for live viewing. Right, and that's the way that they can harness the power of social media to create tentpole events to say, you need to watch that Mad Men when it premieres this week. You don't want to be left out. You want to be a part of the conversation. You want to catch up digitally, and you want to be a part of that. Same thing on Grey's, right? If there's a social currency to that, you want to be a part of it. And so it's really important for the networks to have those moments. That's why reality competitions have done so well too, that people feel that there will be a diminished experience if they wait too long to watch it. But on the flip, so I think networks will always want that.
I think you make a good point. I think serial dramas on broadcast, tough road to hoe.
No, I don't think it's broadcast or that. I think the
okay.
challenge is the people that own the shows that supply them. That in the marketplace later on, as Bill pointed out, they're not as valuable.
Sure.
So like when The Sopranos went on a second run, it didn't do as well. So there's a window for home video. There's a window on Netflix where they can make their first amount of money, but the longer term syndication will not do as well as a Law and Order or a CSI, which are self-contained, which people can watch a marathon on over the weekend. They can come in, they can come out, and that thing can just generate cash.
Yeah, I think the difference also, I think, is on the cable shows, you're basically looking at 10 or 12 episodes. So the commitment is less, it's more concentrated, and I think the viewer, it becomes an event. I think the problem is with a serialized drama, particularly on broadcast, it's not as much of an event, and also because of the scheduling, it's scheduled in batches of programs, and it's not 10 straight weeks or 8 straight weeks, and I think that the viewer can make that kind of a commitment. It's a lot more difficult to make a commitment over a full season.
Give me 10 weeks, not
Yes.
half your year.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We mentioned comedy being different as far as syndication, but Tim, I'm just curious. You know, 3.5 years ago there was talk that comedy was flailing as a genre. Now there's talk it's come back. Big Bang Theory, Modern Family, 2.5 Men, Two Broke Girls. Yeah, New Girl did well this year. You've seen the ups and downs of genres over the years. Did you buy the argument that comedy as a genre was flailing, or was it simply there were no good shows?
I never bought that. And someone said in 1984, this was reported widely, that comedy is dead. I've never been able to find out who that was.
That was 1984.
That was the year
Seinfeld and
before. No, that was the
Frasier.
year before the Cosby Show
Okay.
premiered, and suddenly comedy came back.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was Dave Poltrack. He says, "No, it wasn't me." So I'm not sure who it was. But the truth is that comedy goes back to the earliest days of television, back to radio, for that matter, back to vaudeville before that. So no, and as Bill has alluded, it is the most repeatable of formats, whether serialized or not. Comedy can be played again and again and again. The irony is that the sitcom format, in particular in the 70s, 80s, into the 90s, really, developed a very predictable format, laying pipe, jokes, laugh tracks, part of it, and so forth. And I think the viewers got used to kind of the rhythm of these comedies that they'd been seeing since I Love Lucy, and it became a tired format, no matter who you populated it with. And there have been experiments since then, The Office, different kinds of shows, different ways of executing comedy. But what we really need to find now, because this is a rich motherlode if somebody can crack this, is today's format of comedy, something that looks fresh and yet is comedic, which I think would be very repeatable and potentially very popular too.
Chet and Billy, I mean, certainly Billy and Chet, I mean, your agencies buy lots of TV time. Comedy is kind of looked at where you want to be. I mean, that's even above dramas to a degree. That's very coveted programming to run your ads in, correct?
Because it's younger. And
Okay.
the thing is that a lot of dramas on network television skew older,
Right.
and comedies skew younger. So I think that there's always a great desire. People want to embrace comedies. And NBC, when they used to be Comedy King, now they have shows like 30 Rock and Community, and they're very upscale, and they have a small niche audience, but they don't have a lot of viewers.
Right.
So it's wonderful that Modern Family has started rising, and Big Bang Theory has taken off the way it has, and Two Broke Girls, because advertisers want to embrace this. As I said, it's very desirable. It's high rated, it's younger skewing, so it's a very desirable thing.
Chet, any comment? And Don,
I would agree with that, and,
Yeah.
it's earlier. It's usually earlier on the schedule as well, so
Right.
that contributes to that. Yeah, the earlier day. I mean, in the night.
We've seen 2.5 Men have a little resurgence. So what's your take on the comedy?
I think that comedies really are, it's an easy program to get into. You don't need the emotional commitment to something like Lost, where you had the drama where somebody had to, if you missed a couple of episodes, you kind of felt like you were gone. You couldn't jump back in because you were too lost
Yeah.
to really get back into it. But a comedy, once you know the characters, you get into the rhythm of it. Like Tim said, there's a rhythm to a comedy where you don't have that with a drama. A drama, you really need the storyline. You need to have the different elements to really hook you in. A comedy just needs good writing and good jokes. So that's why it can sustain itself, and you can get in and you can just watch it, and it doesn't matter where you are. That's why it syndicates well. That's why it repeats well, because people don't feel like they need to be in the flow of it. They can just pick and choose and get in and out.
I do think the comedy form, though, has evolved a little, the sitcom.
I was going to ask you, because as someone who's done producing, with Tim suggesting the challenge to come up with a new way of doing comedy.
Sure.
What ideas do you
People
have?
have been doing single camera for quite a long time, but if you look at single camera these days, and I really think I call it the Simpsons effect. And so if you look at what I think the trend really started heavily with Arrested Development, and you look at 30 Rock, even the Bitch in Apartment 23, the new ABC show, you'll see a lot of cutaways. You'll see some nonlinear storytelling. And these quick devices where someone makes a reference and you'll flash back to what you have. If you think about, I call it the Simpsons effect, because when the Simpsons started, they didn't have any of the constraints that a traditional sitcom had, which was you usually have 3 sets and a swing set, right? So if you think about whether it's I Love Lucy or even up to Seinfeld or Murphy Brown, I'm trying to think of some of the classics, you know what the standing sets are, and then every week they would on the side of the stage they would build the swing set. Well, they didn't have to worry about that. They could write something, and if something happened in the past or it happened in prehistoric times, someone will just draw it the same way. And I think that started that rhythm, and that's now evolved. So whether it's Scrubs is another example. I'm trying to think of the chronology, and Tim will be much better at that. But I think that's the evolution of the single camera sitcom where we are right now. And the funny thing is, How I Met Your Mother, which is a multicam, uses that technique as well, and that show is really well done. So I think that's where we are. That's that evolution, and I think it's great. And the sitcoms have become more visual too. So if you think about where sitcoms started, that they came out of radio, that they were radio formats, and they were doing it and probably a couple of years ago, even Seinfeld, you don't have to actually watch it. You could multitask and see that. So much of so many sitcoms these days actually have visual gags, and even Modern Family, that you need to go back and you actually have to pay attention to what it is. So that's just my take on the evolution of the comedy.
And that's good news for advertisers. We talked drama, comedy. Let's and you mentioned reality. Let's get to that sort of third pillar. This stuff now is made, I think, 5 networks in cable, from Nat Geo to A&E to True TV. But now TV's always been a copycat business. I'm sure you can tell us a lot about that. But I mean, you talk about sort of the ultimate copycat stuff. I mean, in these reality shows, network to network, it's Fisherman, the Repo Guys. You have 3 networks that have shows, as we talked about earlier, about bidding for the access to an auction, auctions at a storage facility. And then you have the pawn shop guys. Now there's even, I think, a spin-off on pawn brokering in Cajun country. Mm-hmm. What's the inflection point where there may be a backlash? And consumers may just get tired of it, or is there an insatiable desire for this stuff? Is it that good?
It is.
It's that compelling.
It is that good. It is that compelling. We can poo-poo, we can poo-poo it, but it's compelling story. They're well-told stories, and even if things are cheesy, they're finding characters or situations that we're not used to. The word that's used in the industry, or in the production community, is constructed reality. So you find someone who has an interesting background, who may have an interesting business, and it's not like the old days of a Maisels verite documentary, but you construct the reality around them and you build a television show. And that's how you get Pawn Stars, which is the biggest show on cable, or you get some of the other fishing shows. And the copycat that happens in every business.
No question.
Right. So Hydrox versus Oreo, and people are surprised to learn that Oreo came second. but there's no Hydrox now.
Since you're heavily involved in this, let me ask you a constructive reality question, because you explained it excellently. You start with a compelling character and then build a show around it. But if I am one network, I see compelling characters in the pawnbroker business on one, do I go quickly look for compelling characters?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. You've seen that situation, or there's something about the work environment or some aspect of their life. I mean, after the Jersey Shore, count the number of Jersey shows.
A lot.
Right. And the joke is, if you look at what's happening now, they say that Boston is the new Jersey. I kid you not. So there are, I think, 3 shows set in South Boston, one called Southeast.
That's right.
And so everybody's, I've heard pitches that Appalachia is the new Jersey. Everything's the new New Jersey.
Right.
So you'll see people trying to pick up on a trend and then go from there. But I think there are like 5 or 6 Jersey shows now, between Jerseylicious, their spinoff, Jersey Shore, Snooki spinoff, and who knows what else.
I really question whether 5 years from now there will be as much reality as prominent. There will be reality around. There'll be networks.
I think it'll just look different.
But well, no, I don't. I think it's more than that. The first reaction against reality was in 2004. 2000, Survivor breaks on the scene, huge hit, Bachelor, Amazing Race, reality all over the place in 2001, 2000. 2004 is Desperate Housewives, is Lost. The year after, it's Grey's Anatomy. There was a hunger, obviously, for scripted programming. New, kind of different-looking scripted programming that broke that for a while. Then we have the reattack of the reality, if you will, for reasons not entirely related to creativity too. I mean, there's a lot of economics that support this.
Sure.
If you learn anything about TV history, it's a restless audience out there, and sooner or later, I mean, at one time you say reality is dominating. I counted on the way in. There's 5 of the top 10 shows right now, season to date, are reality shows. At the height of the Western era, 9 of the top 10 shows were Westerns. So, we're not as bad, I guess, as they were back then. But sooner or later, somebody will come through with, maybe it's fantasy, maybe it's a network version of Game of Thrones, maybe it'll be, I'm not sure what it'll be, maybe it's comedy, that will capture the viewer's attention, won't be reality, and everybody will copy it, of course, and then you'll have that wave of programming, because I do think it's a restless audience.
Well, what's interesting is that I took a look at the reality landscape and the percentage of programming on the primetime network schedule that was reality versus 10 years ago, or versus, actually it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and I thought there would be so much more. But what I didn't realize is just the reality changed the scope, because I was at ABC 10 years ago when they didn't have a lot of good scripted programming, and we were running Who Wants to Be a Millionaire 4 nights a week.
That's right.
And then a couple years later, there was Deal or No Deal, and that was running 4 nights a week.
Right.
So and there was Super Nanny and Nanny 911, and I said, oh my God, it was a different type of reality program that was on, but the percentage of the schedule was almost the same. I mean, it's a little more now, I have to say, especially with the X Factor added in and whatever. But I was shocked when I did this analysis to see that it's just reality took a different form.
Yeah, and I think that's
Yeah.
it. It's just not going away as a form, but you're probably right.
Right.
Well, you are right, because these things are cyclical, and you'll see how how they manifest themselves. But as a form, though, reality is. I mean, as a genre, it's not going away. It's not. It's too economical to produce. There are too many channels out there. People need programming, so there will be some form of it that's not what we consider traditional scripted entertainment. But Jersey Shore, they're not actors. It's not written, but it's not really the same as The Bachelor either.
Right. I think there's a difference between what viewers look for in cable and what they look for in broadcast. I think we're going to see a continuation of reality as event programming. I think the Dancing with the Stars, the X Factor, Survivor, The Amazing Race, where it's an event and there's a reason to watch, and in some cases there's a live element to it. I think we're going to continue to see that. I think it's much more difficult to sustain reality program on broadcast, where you're trying to reach the largest audience. Shows come on, they stay, they go. I think you see a lot of that sort of programming on network during the summer as they're trying to extend and have new programming rather than the expense of scripted programming. So I think you're going to see the balance.
And that's the economics
economics
too.
of
The
it.
HUTs are lower, advertising rates are lower, their program costs need to be lower,
Right.
hence
Yeah,
your
and
reality.
I think the networks are also have found that they can find the next big show when they have less competition, and most of the shows started as summer runs and now are part of the overall schedule. So it's sort of their research and development, but on the air.
So one of the neat things would be if we took Hardcore Pawn, made it live as an event show, and we could watch everyone come in with their stuff, and we could see the crazy stuff and see what they offered them during negotiations.
Well, that may
Hosted
be
by
in
Geraldo Rivera.
Yeah, maybe in development right now.
Don, a particular interest of yours, and I think a lot of people, is Saturday nights, right? I mean, this used, and Tim, you'll help us, this used to be, let's just call it a TV night instead of a dumping ground, arguably. And I know sports now, Fox is going to put sports there. But why has this gone away? I mean, there is no original scripted programming that I can think of any note on that night. Is this simply a cost thing where networks are trying to skimp? Or is there just not enough audience there to make it worthwhile? Why don't you tell us your take, and then Tim, give us a history of Saturday nights.
Well, I look at it as from when I was on the agency side. I would talk to my buyers, and they would half the time be in a panic because they couldn't get enough impressions out of what was there from the constraints of the client saying you can only be in certain shows, you have a lot of strict guidelines, but you have to meet your GRP goals. And there just weren't enough impressions for them to get. And they were really begging and borrowing and stealing just to get any impressions.
You're talking about full week. Because Saturday night you have
Exactly,
sales, Sunday,
exactly.
it's an off
Just
day.
they couldn't get enough impressions on their buy. And it seemed ludicrous to me that we would give up an entire night of programming, even though it's the lowest HUT of the week. Some night has to be the lowest HUT. Now, Saturday is the lowest HUT. It used to be, it was a big night of television.
Yeah.
And my research, I looked through probably one of Tim's books. It was in 1973, there was a lineup that was a murderer's row on Saturday night. It was All in the Family, Mary Tyler Moore, Carol Burnett, Bob Newhart, and I'm blanking on the last one, but MASH. There you go.
Yeah.
It was a Saturday night, and people watched, and I think that we just need to give them the content. Because like I said, there has to be one night that's the lowest HUT
Right.
of the week. Right. Now Friday is becoming another wasteland where they don't program. And it seemed like they were just taking this position like, well, we just won't put anything on because nobody's watching. And I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't put anything on the night, no one will watch.
Chicken and
If
egg. Yeah.
If a network, like I postulated a couple of years ago and I challenged Fox, why don't you, if you were going to move Idol and they decided to move it back a couple of days, move Idol's, their results show to Saturday. People will watch the show. They'll come, and if they DVR it, fine. They might DVR it, but they want to see it live. It's an event, people will watch it, and it's going to be on Saturday. You can rebuild the night. Other networks then would, in turn, have to program the night, and you'd build impressions. It's a no-lose situation.
Even in the 80s, Saturday had a certain apogee. Love Boat.
Actually,
right?
when in that
It wasn't
lineup you were
just the
talking
70s.
about,
Yeah.
when All in the Family was on, it raised HUTs. They actually went up.
I think
Total
that
viewing
Idol
went up.
would do the same
Because-
thing
because
because
it
it
was-
would raise HUTs on the nights that it was actually on.
It would.
But I think that what's happened is that the networks are under a lot of financial pressure, of course. It is the lowest of the seven. Only 50 or 60% of America is watching. It's not ideally placed for many advertisers, too, because of, because of the sales and so forth on the weekend. Like Thursday is the perfect night for ads.
And then that's why if you
move
break up
products.
Idol, you have a Thursday and you have a Saturday. And you could do it that
Yeah,
way.
but Saturday you don't get the same.
Yes, if you have a client like Macy's that has a weekend sale, or a Paramount with a movie opening,
It's always been Thursday.
Then again, in a DVR world, some of that is being chipped away. But Bill, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but you.
I was
yeah.
going to say exactly what Tim said. It's really an economic question for the networks because, as it is, when they're doing pilots for the new season, let's just say, they're lucky enough to have enough good programming that they've developed to put on the air, because more than 75% of what they even put on that they consider good programming invest in fails. So the thing is that they have to worry more about their Monday through Friday, because that's really where advertisers needed to drive sales through the weekend to the weekend. If they had programming that was filling that landscape, that was working, maybe then they would start programming Saturday nights again, because I do believe if you build it, they will come. And I think that when there is an event such as a sports event or a game, the viewership is there. It's just, I think, more of an economic question for the networks.
Well, I think also, if memory serves, it started to change when HBO became a factor. And when HBO were premiering movies on Saturday night, that started to change the viewing pattern. And I think that contributed to that. And once it became the lowest viewing night, then the investment went elsewhere in terms of programming. I think the networks have, on occasion, tried, but haven't been very successfly.
And remember, we're talking about original programming too.
We are.
One of the disadvantages that the broadcasters have relative to cable is that they can't, because of their scheduling, repeat their programming as much. You see the closer, it'll run 3-4 more times in the week, but you see NCIS and it's one run. Saturday gives them an opportunity for encore viewing, which adds GRPs, adds viewers to that, and lets them get a little more oomph out of the shows they do pay for.
And economically, usually they're getting their licensing allows them 2 runs, so it becomes very low cost for them to have that encore broadcast.
I want to talk about younger viewers, and Bill Carroll, you may have something to say regarding your CW affiliates, because the network, as I see it, is doing abysmally. It's really, I think, as someone said, one of those undercovered stories. And that is a way to bring young women into primetime broadcast television that's important. MTV has had a little resurgence, but in this digital world, I mean, are broadcasters at risk of really losing a younger audience?
Well, I think to a degree they are. I think the CW has a different kind of strategy. Their strategy is basically, and I'll use the term, across platforms. They see the opportunity to have the broadcast as a means of giving credibility and giving buzz to programming that appears across platforms, and that's how they sell their network. So it's a different strategy, and it's aimed at a particular younger female audience that is watching on the different platforms. So when you analyze it, yes, I would agree that they've not had great success if you look at the pure ratings numbers, but if you look at it across their ability to deliver that particular audience, which is of great value, then they would make the case that they are delivering that, just not exclusively in their broadcast over the air.
So Chet, if that's happening, I remember when I was in college, fortunately there was no internet, because I think if I were in the library, I would probably be watching a full episode of a show rather than studying. And if CW is succeeding by getting these young people to do that, at what point do the other networks, when the 18 to 22-year-olds now, who have become used to watching full episodes online, when they become in that, let's say, 25 to 54 demo that's important, at what point did they follow, did they move away from watching linear broadcast TV on other networks besides CW?
Well, and that's the...
It may be happening now.
And then that's the network's challenge, to roll up all of the views in a way that advertisers can buy them, and that they can report on the success of their shows no matter what platform. And that's obviously going on in right now, those discussions in lots of places, and especially at the networks and at the agencies with the networks to figure that out. I mean, the other thing about the CW that's beyond just watching the show, beyond watching the episodes, is that they're incredibly culturally relevant. they are on the bleeding edge of pop culture or mass pop culture with the shows that they put out, whether that's Vampire Diaries, whether that's Gossip Girl, although it's aging, and that's part of their cachet. That's part of what builds their value to the advertiser, and that's also what's driving everybody to the platforms for them to monetize.
As we run out of time, you can't, in a sense, talk about TV today without talking about Oprah, and that's in two buckets. I'm going to ask Bill Carroll to start, because when Oprah went off the air with her syndicated show in May of 2011, there were new entries into the daytime talk business this past fall. Nothing seemed to, and nothing will replace her, but nothing seemed to even come close. So that again is going to be attempted this fall. Right. Ricky Lake, I believe, has something coming up. Jeff Probst. Can anything? Katie Couric's the big one, and then we need to see who's going to pair with, I guess, Kelly Ripa. But give us the landscape, and will anything even come close to bringing some of those rating points back? Well,
I think if you look at the overall viewership in the time period, there hasn't been that much of a decline. It's just the pie has been cut up in various ways, and I think that's where the difference is. We're never going to see a situation like Oprah. Oprah was a unique phenomena that started at a time where her main competition at that time was Phil Donahue. And Oprah basically started as a morning show. It started in most markets at 10 a.m. in the morning. It was then positioned by Roger King and the folks at King World as the ideal lead out to soap operas, and then was positioned at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It then was, because of the volume of audience it delivered, it was then repositioned as a news lead-in. And so over time, A, the show evolved, and B, how it was positioned changed. Right now, you're splitting up the audience. There's an audience for Ellen. There's an audience for Dr. Oz. There's an older audience for Judge Judy. So they're across the spectrum. Next year, at least in my judgment, is going to be the year where the rubber meets the road. Yeah. Because we're going to have Katie Couric coming on. We're going to have a second year for Anderson Cooper. We're going to have Dr. Phil, who has been the most successful, and there are a lot of reasons why, because competition has changed, things of that nature. So you're going to have a lot of movement, a lot of new shows, and then also it's the year in which all of these shows, based on performance, are going to be looking for their renewals and their positioning. So next year is where we get an indication of what's going to happen, and then from there, stations are going to be asked to make commitments for 2014, which is when all these deals come to an end. So it's really going to be the year where all of this is analyzed, and what happens with Katie Couric is going to be really important.
Billy, real quick, Katie Couric on the CBS Evening News premiered to huge numbers. Then it just sort of was on a precipitous decline. So we will get huge premiere numbers probably in the fall. Is the show going to make it?
I think
as a hit, true hit?
Well, there's a big difference of what's a hit. I think it'll stay on the air. I think, Ellen only pulls a 2.4 rating. I don't even know if Katie is going to settle in at that level. I think she'll settle in maybe in the low 2s. I mean, I think Katie, we think of her as, morning person and chipper, and people like her personality, plus she has a news background. But I think people know she tried the evening news and that didn't work. And I think people are just looking elsewhere. So I think people will be curious to see her and tune in. But I don't see it sustaining to be a hit. But, a hit is relative these days. If it stays on the air, that might be considered a hit. Or if the ABC O&Os are happy with how it, if the 2.0 rating is leading into their news, then, it could be a hit. But it's not going to be another Oprah.
A lot of money to be made. Does anyone have a question?
Could I just add one thing to that? I don't know that there's ever been a hit out of the box in daytime. Game shows, soap operas, whatever. I mean, it takes time, and I think you're right about her.
I think probably the closest to that would be
Dr.
Oprah,
Phil,
and then
yeah.
the spin-off.
She took time, too.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly,
she
yeah.
took time, but I think
Maybe Dr.
basically
Phil.
by the first year you could see the potential, and when she moved to 4 o'clock because there was larger viewership potential, I think that's basically the only really daytime hit within the first 2 years. But in the current environment, if you're not a hit by the middle of the first year, even if you have a 2-year syndication deal, pretty much stations are already downgrading the show and looking for the next show. So you don't have what you used to have, which is some degree of patience.
Any questions? We'll go down the line real quick with one more Oprah thing. Why has OWN struggled? The Oprah brand was supposed to be something that was going to be successful wherever it went. Any thoughts on that?
You listening, Oprah, out there?
Any advice you'll take, right?
I'll tell you, I tested a lot of programs, particularly when I was at Lifetime, which were inspirational, uplifting programs. And the most frequent reaction we got from viewers, women, when we were testing these shows is, oh, I love that. The most frequent reaction we got when it went on the air was it died. Oprah was magic. The way she brought it together in her show, with her weight problems and other things that she did, made something out of it. But to say that that could expand from 1 hour per day to 24 hours a day is frankly more inspiration and uplift than viewers want. So she tried to do that with OWN originally. I think she'll find her way. Her celebrity interviews. She'll do other things, just as Oxygen, other networks have evolved over time. But the idea that it's going to be all the Oprah show is not viable.
And there may have been that perception, and that may have hurt. You want to go quickly?
Yeah, I would say that the difference is OWN wasn't Oprah. The audience, the idea of the OWN network, as I understand it, was the O magazine. And the O magazine is Oprah on the cover, Oprah doing a major interview, all of Oprah's contributors, Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, Nate Berkus, none of that was on OWN. And the idea is that viewers can't find the network is not true. When she's there and she does a major interview, they find the network. Right. So if it's on 178 or 257, it really doesn't matter. I think what Oprah has to make a decision is she going to have the presence on that network? If she does, in a significant way, they have the potential for success. And I agree with Tim. What she needs to do is broaden what she does. I think you can be aspirational, but you have to be practical.
Chet, any thoughts?
I think it comes down to programming filter and focus, and I think that, well, listen, I know you look at a lot of the cable networks out there, and they've had to reposition it and figure out who they are and what they stand for. She's had 4 different heads of programming over the last 3 years. I think she has made a commitment to being on air. Your point about people will find it if she has something worthwhile. The Bobby Christina interview was huge for her, but she can't be on 24/7. Right. So she needs to figure out how to fill it out. Most of her contributors have other deals elsewhere, so whether it's Susie Orman, Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, so she can't even bring those friends along. She has to build a whole new set of friends. It's going to take time, and I think that it's probably going to be a struggle for a while, and she's going to have to build those people from scratch. Rosie was a debacle, but even from the announcement, it didn't even make sense to me from the filter of what they thought Oprah was. Or excuse me, what the OWN network was and what Oprah's brand was. So Rosie just felt like program filler, and ultimately they pulled the plug because it wasn't worth the money.
We really only have a minute, but I bet you're disappointed it didn't totally succeed because you wanted to reach rabid Oprah fans as an advertiser.
Well, it's fun. Of course, we wanted it to succeed. Well, it's funny. I went to Oprah's live class at Radio City last week, and every person in that audience was listening to every word that Oprah said. She's relatable, she's engaging, she's heartfelt, she's self-deprecating. I mean, she said, I have an uphill battle ahead, and I feel like I have to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And the thing is that people love Oprah, but that her shows aren't all Oprah, and the quality of a lot of the shows that were put on O were below par. They weren't Oprah standards. So it is an uphill battle she's going to have.
Does she just need a new name for the network?
She didn't need a brand, and she became Oprah the brand, and people really fell in love with Oprah the person.
Right.
So finding that, going to another network and breaking through that people only watch a certain number of networks, they weren't going to chase Oprah when they decided to find something else. They weren't going to go to look for Oprah where she wasn't anymore. Now it wasn't Oprah, it was Oprah's brand. And
You guys have
cable's
been
doer.
you guys have been a great panel. Thank you for your time. Join me in giving them a round of applause.